A very warm welcome to all from the Other Side series. I'm Raga Olga De Silva, or Totally Out Now as you know me. I'm the co founder and director of Speaking Minds, India's largest international speaker agency representing speakers and content from all over the world. Wow. So we all go through challenges in life, don't we? We all navigate through those challenges, but sometimes life throws a curveball at us. Incidents that occur beyond our control, and these incidents, or shall I say accidents, leave us paralyzed in more ways than one. Until at some point in our life, we're able to make peace with it and heal. The journey is arduous, isn't it? So much happens in between until we reach that point of peace. Today we have with us Lis Cashin, whose smile radiates far, far, far beyond her face. You will see what I mean. Her positivity is truly infectious, and the life she has created for herself is so full of lessons for us all. But there is a lot of trauma and suffering behind the smile. I'm looking forward to knowing Lis from the other side today. Lis, welcome. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really well, thank you.
Look at that smile. The laughter, I should say. It's amazing. I still remember the first time I spoke with you, and what stayed behind with me was this infectious smile, laughter, and I was almost amazed that I said, is this the same person who has been through so much in life? And to me, that is truly a big lesson for us all, that we could go through life's challenges, and here you are, you know. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us and sharing so much with us. I'm really looking forward, Liz. So, should we start in 1983? Because I feel that people watching us, the audience here, would love to know what really happened when we talk about suffering, trauma. These are terms, these are words that we use sometimes quite loosely. I just wanted the audience to have a glimpse of what that means actually when you're 13 years old and life throws you a curveball.
Yeah, so it was actually 37 years ago yesterday. It was the anniversary, and I went to school that day as we do as school children. We had a sports day, and I was really excited because I got a lot of recognition through sports at that point in my life, and that's something that I really craved, I really thrived on. And so I'd been selected to take part in a few events. I took part in a couple of the events, and then it was the Javelin Event. So there was a few girls who took their throw before me, and then my name was called. I walked up to the box. I got the javelin. I took a deep breath and I took a run up, and I threw the javelin as hard as I could because I really wanted to win a medal in the sports day event. And at first the javelin was flying in a straight line, which was great. And then at the very last second, it veered to the right. And unfortunately, my school had put one of my 13-year-old friends on the field to mark the throw. And for some reason, she wasn't looking, and the javelin was heading straight towards her. So we all screamed her name. And I had a moment of relief because she ducked, and I thought, oh, sometimes we have a near miss. Have you ever had that in the car, or what do you think? Oh gosh, that was close. And so I had that moment of like, oh, that was close. And then it turned to horror as the javelin actually struck her in the head, and she stumbled forwards. There was a lot of blood, and I just collapsed with the shock. You can imagine at 13 years of age and just witnessing something so horrific and happening to your friend and feeling completely responsible for what's happening. And the rest is a bit of a blur. I just remember my overwhelming feeling was to go and get some help, to go and get an ambulance. This was pre-mobile phones back in the day. And so we were away from a telephone, and I just wanted to go and get some help. But apparently I got up and I was just running around in circles in shock until somebody realized that actually I needed some help, and they took me inside. So
you needed help for yourself as well, you meant?
Yes, exactly. There's so much shock, so I thought I blinded her. I thought that's what had happened, and I was just desperate to get to the hospital to tell her how sorry I was. And when my mum came home, we went up to the hospital, and when we arrived, we were told that my friend had gone to a different hospital. And I when the accident happened, I think I intuitively knew how serious it was, but people kept telling me that it was going to be all right, and I thought, it's not okay. You know, I knew what I'd seen. And then my mum went off to speak to a doctor, and she came back, and we sat outside, and I remember asking Mum, is she going to die? And Mum said, yes, I think so. And that, it's like my whole world just imploded. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I'm sure, people watching this, listening to this cannot even imagine the pain, the shock, the trauma of this, and very sorry about this. But tell me, from then on, what happened to, who was this 13-year-old girl? From what I've understood about you, you were fun, bubbly, you loved sports, you loved doing things. What happened to that 13-year-old after this incident?
I felt like I was a walking zombie. I felt like I was here, but not here. I think a part of me died on that field that day. You know, I think it was just so traumatic. And our systems are incredible. Our minds are incredible. To try and deal with that level of trauma, we split off a part of ourselves in order to survive. But then we never feel happy. We never feel alive because we've split off this part of us without knowing that that's what we've done. But because there was no counselling back then, this was in the 80s, there was no help at all to help me to come to terms with what had happened. And so I internalized that it was entirely my fault. You know, I thought the javelin left my hand, my friend's dead, end of story. You know, I couldn't hear anything else, that it couldn't have been my fault. I thought, even though my friend's parents never blamed me. I mean, they were incredible. But I functioned, I functioned day to day for a long time. I think I was just getting up and going through the motions But I used to write letters to my friend, just telling her how sorry I was and asking her questions. And of course, they'd never be posted and I'd never get the answers. But I felt a lot of comfort from those. I felt like I was connecting to her in the only way I knew how. And as an adult, much later when I got help, I was told that was the best thing I could have done. There's a way to express my feelings, was to write them down.
Sure.
Yeah.
So did you play sports after that? And what was the impact of this incident on that aspect of your life? Yes.
I never threw the javelin again. In fact, our school never had javelin again. And in the inquest later that year, the school were found to be responsible for what had happened. Health and safety guidelines hadn't been followed. But I wasn't at the inquest, and so I didn't get to hear other people's views. And so again, I just was left with my own kind of interpretation. But I did play tennis later in my teens, but I would always stop myself from being successful. I think it was like an automatic switch because I'd been good at the javelin and then this trauma had happened. Anytime, I think in other aspects as well, anytime I started to do well in something, it was like a safety mechanism would shut down and stop me from becoming successful. And also, I took on some really negative beliefs about myself. So I believed that I was evil and that I deserved to be punished. And I only really understood that I had those beliefs much later, but they then drove my behavior. So I punished myself in so many different ways, through the food that I ate. I would punish myself every time I ate something. I'd have this really nasty voice in my head that was constantly shouting at me and telling me how awful I was. I was in, when I was older and in relationships, they were destructive relationships. It was almost like that's all I believed I deserved. And, I think I also went on to unhealthy addictions. In my 20s, I took drugs. And I think, for other people, it might be alcohol or gambling or food, all sorts of things. But again, it was a way, I think, to punish myself for what had happened. Yeah.
Sure. So self-sabotaging, self-destructions, the dysfunctions, I guess, from going through an experience where you have no control, but you don't know, you're too young to deal with it. There is no, mental health counseling at that point, no one to tell you, no, you were not wrong. So
Yeah.
it's what a lot of us are going through even at this point, right?
Mm.
If you notice, a lot of us in life, I mean, especially during lockdown and the uncertainty, we are going through all this. We don't know how to manage. We don't know what's coming next, and a lot of these things are not in our control. And I
Mhm.
also know a lot of people are taking on too much of the
Yeah.
stress. And one of the reasons, Liz, I wanted to talk to you because a lot of us learn from other people's stories. Sometimes not for our own stories, right? From
Mhm.
your own story, it took you a long, long time to learn and unlearn and then relearn. But
Yes.
sometimes listening to other people's stories, we learn so much, and that was one critical reason I wanted to have you on this show, because to
Mhm.
me it is so important to understand what is going on in this mind of ours when we are faced with challenges. At that point we don't really know what's happening, right? It is always in hindsight we believe that things
Mhm.
could have been different. So in your hindsight, sitting in this position right now, when you look back, what are the key things you think may have helped you live a
Mhm.
different life?
I think one of the main ones was understanding that what I was experiencing was a normal reaction to an abnormal event. So, however we're feeling, we're having a normal reaction. I think this whole stigma around mental health, we judge ourselves, we judge others so harshly. But actually, if we're going through a difficult time, whatever that may be, and if that's impacting our mental health, it's a normal reaction. And until we accept that it's a normal reaction, we're not going to really allow ourselves to get the help that we really need. And and that was the thing with me. It was my shameful secret. Internally inside my mind was chaos and confusion. And in fact, I was living with undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder for over 30 years. And, you know, but I didn't understand that. I just knew I was in chaos. And it seemed to me, and I think this is, a similar theme for other people, it seemed that everyone else had it sorted. Do you ever have that thing? You think that everyone else has got it sorted, everyone else is managing okay. Of course, it's not true. I know that now, that it's not true.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And
but
social media doesn't help, does it? Every morning
social media doesn't help. No.
yeah,
And
you
I was
get on
judging myself.
yeah, sorry, you get on Facebook and you think, what a fantastic life
Oh,
everyone else is living. So you better dress up, get up and show up,
yeah.
seriously, isn't it?
Yeah, because we don't show the photos when we're struggling. We
Exactly.
just show the highlighted, edited versions, and even the airbrushing that we see a lot. And it's not real life, and it's this perfect ideal that is an illusion that we subscribe to and think that somehow we should be meeting this level of perfection, and that because we're not, we're failing. I always thought I was failing. I was constantly failing at life, and that's just a circle you go round and round and round and round, unless with awareness you can see, oh, this isn't true. Everybody is struggling. The World Health Organization before lockdown said that 1 in 4 of us will struggle with a mental health disorder at some point in our lives, and now they say 1 in 3, 1 in 2, and that's a mental disorder, that's a mental illness. And we also can have poor mental health,
Yeah.
which is not part of those statistics, which is where we're just trying to overachieve, or we're pushing too hard, and we can't concentrate, we're struggling, we can't sleep because our thoughts are racing, all of these things, and it's happening to so many of us. And I think that's really why I want to speak out, to say
Sure.
you are not alone, and there is nothing wrong with you.
Correct. You are not alone. Seriously, that's just something. I am not alone as well. I keep saying to myself. But Liz,
Yeah.
whenever we've had women on our show and with very interesting stories, very very profound lessons and stories, one thing that comes out is always women talk about feeling shame. And
Mm.
this is something that I always wonder. Why is it that we feel shame for something that we haven't done or we
Mhm.
haven't been in control of? So, what is shame?
Well, I know that, so guilt is around something that I've done. I feel guilty if I've done something, but shame is my identity. It goes right to the core of who I am. It's a rejection of ourselves. And I think, again, it's, when we're children, we hear a lot, no, don't do that. That's wrong. You're naughty. Sometimes you're bad. you know, we hear these references a lot when we're children, and I think we internalize that. Well, there's something inherently wrong with me. There's something that's wrong with me. And then we carry that through, and that's the shame. And we don't want other people to know that that's how we really feel. You know, I wouldn't let anybody come close to me in case they found out that I was this awful person. So I push relationships away. And I think that's where it starts, is when we're very little and we feel that shame. You know, no, you're told, no, you're wrong. And you think, oh, I'm wrong. Not that that thing is wrong, but I'm wrong. My identity, who I am, is wrong. And then without questioning it, without awareness, without these kinds of conversations, we just carry that through.
Sure.
Yeah.
You
But the
talked
great
about,
news is, with
sure.
awareness, you can change it.
Yes, absolutely. You know, all these stories that are coming out, the narratives are changing. I think the whole social conditioning around, like you said, the emotions, shame, guilt, finger pointing.
Mhm.
A lot of us are still kind and compassionate. Thank God for that, because the world
Yes.
is still a beautiful place. But a lot of people are not either, right? So that
Yeah.
those fears of being judged, that fear of being called ridiculous names, right? That
Mhm.
prevents us from living our own truth at times. So
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to you about PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, which a lot of us kind of know about, but don't really believe that it's happening to us. And I know for
Mhm.
a fact that, I mean, my kids are now 22. I'm certain, looking back, when I've had them, having twins used to cause me a huge amount of stress. Going to work, we had to work, and all the pressures of having a little family, having sometimes no money, enough money, and all of us are going through a whole lot of stuff like that right now as well. So
Yeah.
what is PTSD? And you saying it took you 30 years to understand that. So how do you change that? And what can you tell our
Mhm.
audience? What are these signs?
Yeah, and it's a really good point. I think when I went through my trauma, PTSD wasn't even a thing yet. You know, it wasn't known yet, and it actually came about through soldiers at war, and for a long time, that's what it was attributed to, because of course they go through a lot of trauma. And I was diagnosed on and off with depression over the years. It wasn't depression, actually, it was undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. And what it is when we experience something, whatever it is, and it might be a divorce, as a child, it might be our parents divorcing. It can just be a shock, a big shock. And what it is, our system can't process that. It's too overwhelming. And so what it does is a part of our mind freezes and it stays frozen until a time, hopefully, when we can access it and help it to become just a normal memory. So my mind was frozen in horror back on. It was almost like it was a freeze frame, if you like, at the moment of the accident. It was just too much. I couldn't take it in. It was just horrific. The whole thing was just so horrific. And it was too much for me, for my 13-year-old to be able to process. And so very cleverly, my mind froze it and filed it. And I was split off from that part of me until I started to speak about my story a few years ago publicly. And I was standing on the stage, and every time I talk about it, I'd feel re-traumatized. And I thought, this can't be right, because I really felt like it was almost like a calling to be able to share with other people what I'd learned, like we are today. I think there wasn't people that could share with me, and I really want to, show other people that there is a way out. And so I started to talk about it, and I was constantly re-traumatized. And I actually read a book called The Body Keeps the Score. The first chapter was about a soldier with PTSD, and I felt like I was reading my life story. I thought, oh gosh, I think this is what I've got. And so I went to my doctor and asked him if I could have an assessment. And he actually, I feel quite emotional thinking back, he actually apologized on behalf of the medical profession and said he was so sorry that no doctor had thought to send me for an assessment before I'd asked for it. And so I did have the assessment, then I had some specific trauma treatment, and I had to relive the day that it happened, which was very painful, as you can imagine. But I did it in a safe space. I did it in a very held space, and I was resilient enough. I developed a lot of resilience to be able to hold myself through that process. And I had a moment where I just looked at the therapist And I said to her, because I was reliving as the 13-year-old, and I said, I really didn't do anything deliberately wrong. I just remembered I was just a 13-year-old child, just excited, wanted to win a medal, just doing what she was told. No part of me wanted it to happen. And so I was able to have compassion. You talked about that earlier. I just dropped a lot of that guilt that I'd been carrying for so long, realizing it really wasn't my fault. I really didn't do anything deliberately wrong. And so I think that's the thing with a lot of trauma is we do blame ourselves as a child or an adult. And so it's just really remembering, I really want that message to get to people, whether you're in an abusive relationship or you're going through trauma or it's a divorce or something, it's not your fault. And people kept saying that to me, but I've been through it, and I want people to really understand that it's really not your fault, and go and get some professional help to be able to work through it.
Yes, I mean, I think it's so important to recognize that, isn't it, Liz? And then to seek help, to seek support. We sometimes run away, and we just kind of not just run away from others, but we run away from our own selves. And that is big. And when you talked about blame just now, and I thought blame, the opposite of blame is forgiveness, right? And the forgiveness is, do you forgive yourself before you forgive others? So how was that for you?
Yeah, and again, for a long time, I thought there was no way I was ever going to let go of blame. And then when I unpacked the story, and I realized, oh my gosh, the school had responsibility. And, I wanted to blame the school then, that angry child was, and it was, 30 years too late for me to say anything to the school. But I just thought, actually, I had a right to be safe at school as well as my friend. I really got it. I thought, for the first time, this was just a few years ago, but it was life-changing for me. I had a right to be safe. I shouldn't have been put in that position. That should never have happened. But then I thought, if I hang on to that blame for the school, that's just hurting me. When we hang on to blame, it actually hurts us, not the other person. And I don't want to hurt myself anymore. I mean, this has been the process. I love myself. I feel emotional just saying that, but it's been such a journey to loving myself. And I don't want to hang on to blame for anyone, because I also understand they didn't do it maliciously. They were negligent, but it wasn't deliberate, and so, I just try and have compassion for other people, and we're all doing the best we can with wherever we are.
Absolutely.
And we have to take responsibility. Yeah.
Correct. And I love what you said. I love myself. And people watching in, please just take that 1 second and say to yourself, I love myself, because it's such an important reminder for all of us, right? I love myself. But we forget that. And also,
actually, it might be too much for people to say, I love myself. But if they could just start with, I'm willing to love myself.
Yeah.
I'm willing to love myself. Yeah.
Sure. The other day I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said to me that, you talk to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend. If a friend, has a challenge, you would tell them that you're there to support them. You're kind to them. You're compassionate. You give them the right advice. Forgive, forget, move on, let go. You cannot control. Those are key words, golden words, right? We say, be kind to yourself, love yourself. Why do we not say this to ourselves? I don't know. Until we've been through this journey of pain, suffering. You talk a lot about suffering. I've watched one of your talks, the TEDx talk, and every time you use the word suffering, I can feel the suffering in your voice. I want to understand what the word suffering means.
So for me, if we experience something that's painful, we experience pain. And that's natural. It's our body's way of saying there's something wrong, something needs to be addressed. That's normal. But suffering to me is then the thoughts that we create about what's happened. So for me, the thoughts that I created, I was evil, I deserve to be punished, that created suffering in my mind for decades, because it was unprocessed. Those beliefs, those thoughts ran my life. And that created suffering. I created that suffering. I didn't have control, like you say, over what happened. But then I created those destructive beliefs and thoughts until, with awareness, I realized what was happening. And then a big point for me was then I realized I had choice. When I realized I had choice, I grabbed that choice, and I've been choosing every day. I committed to that choice every day. I thought, if this is my responsibility and if I have choice, then I'm committing to that, and I'm going to keep choosing every day. I'm going to keep taking responsibility for my happiness. I'm not going to give that to anybody else. I'm not going to give anybody control over my happiness. And I gave too many people control over my happiness. And actually, it's my responsibility. And so I think that's why you see the smile that you see, because I'm not going to let anyone else dictate my happiness.
Excellent. So you say suffering is optional, right? That's something that you always say. And I've heard a lot of people, you'll be surprised how many people say, I am suffering, I am suffering. And I know that a lot of people believe that they are suffering because it is difficult. Life is not easy.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people like that, who believe that they're suffering and they are truly suffering? How can suffering be optional for them?
I think what you said was hit the nail on the head. They believe they're suffering. That's the key part. They are suffering because they believe they're suffering. And so, yeah, once they realize that actually they have a choice what they believe. So they can choose to stay in suffering. That's entirely their responsibility. They have that choice. If somebody wants to stay in suffering, I'm not going to try. I never try and make anybody change their mind. We all have a choice in life. But when you know that it is a choice, then not to do anything is still a choice.
Yes.
So if you choose to stay in suffering, but there's another way, then that's your choice. But I actually don't want to then hear other people talk about their suffering if I know that they know there is a way out. Because why would I want to just keep hearing being negative all the time when I know that they have a choice?
Sure. I'm totally with you on that. Every morning, I don't know how about you, but for me, every morning I wake up, I pray. My routine is I pray, and the first thing I tell myself, today I'm going to have the best day of my life, because I don't know what's going to await me. I get easily stressed about things. It doesn't show, but I do, because I take on a lot. But I tell myself, no matter what life throws at me today I'm going to have the best day. Today I'm not going to get stressed. I'm going to be less anxious. And as things unfold through the day, and when I find myself in situations which I cannot control, I remember that I apply those thoughts, and they really work. It's like retuning, like a radio frequency. I use that in my life, and it really works. And I tell my friends, that's what you do. Just retune. Maybe sometimes the signals are getting lost.
Yeah. It's so true. And I do, when I wake up in the morning, I practice mindfulness. I meditate. And in fact, it was in India. I know that we talked about that before, but I started to learn meditation in India in my first trip. And in my second trip, I actually did a 10-day Vipassana in Chennai. And that was life-changing, just having that extended 10 days with nothing but me, myself, and I internally. And you can imagine, I actually had PTSD at that point, so it was actually very painful, but ultimately liberating. And then I committed to meditation as a daily practice because it helped me to stay centered and balanced and resilient, so that if I ever do feel the trauma or something happens, I'm much more able to process it quicker. I'm able to move through it a lot more easily. But I wake up in the morning and I feel good, and actually for most of my life, I felt bad when I woke up. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd think, I'm sure some people will resonate what I'm saying, they just don't want to get out of bed, or got to go to work, they don't really enjoy their work, or they're in a difficult relationship or something. I've been through all of that at different stages. And I just wake up and then I have a moment and this sinking feeling. So, but with meditation and learning about my mind, like you say, reframing, having choice, all of these things have all helped me to have a better day. And it starts with meditating and mindfulness. And I think what I heard you say is you set your intention for the day. And that's what I do. Set my intention for my life, set my intention for my day.
Sure. And sometimes it is by the moment, right? You can plan your entire day, but in that moment, it's so difficult. And in that moment, you have to apply, right?
Yes, and in the moment, what I love, this has helped me so many times, is this too will pass. This too will pass. So if anybody's struggling, and when it's overwhelming, you don't feel like you do have a choice. It's just too much. Even if you can say to yourself in the middle of all of that, just say to yourself, this too will pass. This too will pass. It will give you a bit of comfort, and actually everything passes. That's what I've learned. We're never, although it feels like you're going to be stuck in it forever, you're not. At some point, something else will happen. Like the seasons that we have, autumn, winter, spring. So we have our emotions, and they change. You won't always feel bad. Something else will come. There is light. Just trust in that if you can, but just know that this too will pass.
Amazing. Sure, it's all reaffirmations for us, today. And Liz, at this point, I'm going to take some audience comments and questions. Audience watching, listening in, please feel free to write into us. And I can see that there are a couple of very interesting incidents being shared with us. Roshni Zaidi, she's a friend of mine from Mumbai. She says, I lost a friend too as a 13-year-old. Was at the crossing with her, and I just crossed like 8-10 seconds earlier while she was saying hello to someone. I digressed in those 8-10 seconds towards the ice cream shop while she was crossing split seconds behind me, crushed brutally by a truck which had construction iron rods in it. Still haven't gotten over it. I understand how you must have not healed yet with the guilt ever, but no, this was never your fault. It was her time to go. Big hugs. So I don't know whether you want to comment on that. And Roshni, very sorry to hear. I didn't know this about you, but thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And my friend who died, she had just taken the place of another girl. And what I hear in these stories is often something had just happened with the Twin Towers. You hear people that were supposed to be at work, they missed the train. There's always these things. And I do believe that there's a bigger picture to life. I do believe that. It's good. That gives me comfort. And I think for your friend to know that, we were talking before about letting go of blame. It's not your friend's fault that she wasn't there. It's knowing that none of that was her responsibility. And actually, I think we said, I don't feel the guilt anymore. And so I'd really hope for your friend, if she's carrying that guilt, that actually she doesn't have to carry it anymore. And that, she's having a normal reaction to a really horrific event. And that actually maybe if she could reach out and get some support, that she could help to work through and let go of the guilt, because these things, they're so horrific, we just can't process them as 13-year-olds. And so I really hope that your friend gets the support that she needs.
Roshni, I hope you can get some help if you haven't yet taken, because I think she's one of the nicest souls I know, by the way. Beautiful human being. And thank you for listening in. Thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing. This is Heather Conwell, and she has made a comment. She says, I was sexually abused at 14 and didn't receive any support. It wasn't until my 40s that I divorced and remarried a man who was the first person who believed in me and my ability to help others. I worked with children who had been abused, which helped me in my healing. And now I lecture at university about social, emotional, and mental health issues. Thank you for speaking about these issues today. Thank you, Heather. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Liz, you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. And it's so amazing to hear that you have used what has happened to you and transformed it and making a difference. And I think that's what's really helped me as well in my own recovery, is sharing my story. I work with teenagers. I also work in schools. I work in organizations, helping people to understand mental health and how, it's on a par with physical health. We've all got physical health. We've all got mental health. And it's about raising that awareness. And that really helps me to feel like I couldn't control what happened to me, but I can choose what I do now with it. And for me, making a difference and raising awareness and sharing what I know really helps me with my own recovery.
Audience listening in, just remember that there's going to be lots more conversation here. We're going to talk to Liz about workplace issues and mental health and how to cope with that as well. So stay tuned in. We have Vishwadeep Bali saying hello, Raga. Hello, Vishwadeep. Bismarck Dai, someone I know who from my ex-colleague and friend. Hello again. Bhakti Shinde. She says, I love myself. And I also We love you, Raga, always. Thank you, Bhakti. That's sweet. Ila Arun is a very well-known folk singer from India. She's also a very well-known actor from India. She has joined in, and she's saying, listening to you is a great learning. Thank you,
Thank
Ilaji.
you.
Thank you for being here. Roshni Zedi has said, thank you. The girl who shared her experience, I've carried it all my life. I had to hear this today. Thank you, she says.
Oh, yeah, great. And I'm happy if she wants to contact you afterwards. I'm happy to share, the things that have helped me if that would support.
Roshni, I'd be very happy to connect you with Liz if ever you needed that. Indrani, thank you for joining in. Lovely to see you. Ritu Alka Bhagat says, she's sharing something very interesting. She says, I'm also going through severe depression after my father's demise in January. Lost both of them the same manner. Nobody was with them. The door was locked from inside. They both had heart attack. Lost my mother 9 years back. Oh my God, that is very painful and traumatic. Is there anything, Liz, you want to share?
Well, I think because it's so recent that then that, the pain that they're feeling is natural. We need that time to feel that grief. That's a trauma in itself to know that they were the circumstances. So I would say just be kind to yourself. Know that what you're feeling is normal. And also, again, reach out for support if you have trusted friends that could just listen to you or just even be a shoulder to cry on, but it's important not to just keep these things inside, that there is somebody that they can talk to and just share how they're feeling. Or you remember when I was little and I used to write my feelings. I would just say that to anybody who feels they don't yet have somebody they can talk to. You can always write down. And I find I still do that to this day. I can journal my feelings, and it just helps me in a way to let go. And not be carrying so much.
Thank you, Liz, for sharing that. So we were listening to Liz's personal part of the story, which is about Liz at 13 playing sport, javelin throw. As I've said, it hit her best friend and her best friend passed away. And Liz carried that inside her for years and years. And she's now an advocate for mental health and wellness. And now, Liz, I'm going to talk to you from the other side. The other side of you have become this person, and you're a trained life coach, you're a business and leadership coach, you're a mental health first aider, mindfulness practitioner, master NLP practitioner. That's a lot of things that you have over the years collected professionally. So my question to you is, a lot of us now carry this baggage. We are the same people who are at home, we're the same people who take ourselves to a workplace. So when we carry, and I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong word, but I've sometimes feel that I've carried a baggage when I've dealt with my own mental health issues. So when I carry that baggage with me to my workplace, how safe is it for me to be carrying that kind of baggage?
I would say if anybody is carrying any sort of emotional baggage, then, it's really time to get some support. We can all feel that we're carrying, I felt like I was carrying around these weighted sacks, it was almost like my physiology was, bending because of the weight of it all. And you're right, we show up at work. We can't just leave our personal selves at the door and then become someone else. We can to a degree. And I did that. I used to put on a mask at work, pretend to be okay. But actually, I was just struggling so much. And so I think at work, it's really important that, in a workplace culture, that we're creating the sort of environment where we can talk about mental health. And I work with organizations to create those kind of cultures. And then, if we're a line manager, it's really important that we are the person who our teams can trust to talk about how they're feeling. Because if they can't, they're going to keep struggling. And actually, that's going to affect their productivity. In business, we all want to know that we're being productive and our teams are engaged. And the fact is, if we're struggling with our mental health, it's going to have a knock-on effect to that. So it's a business benefit as well as a human benefit to actually really start to be able to talk about mental health at work as well as outside of work.
Sure. There's so much of stigma attached to the word mental health, right? Mental health, people don't talk about it. The word depression has become a fashionable thing to say right now. It's a label that a lot of us are talking about now, which is great in a manner, but that's a misunderstood word, right? Everybody like is saying, "Oh, I'm so depressed. I'm depressed," right? That's
Yeah.
one. And the other side to it is the mental health. Nobody will ever say to anyone that I have mental health issues because they're so worried about what will society say, what will my workplace say, how will my colleagues treat me,
Yeah.
what will happen to my promotion or
Yeah.
my place at work. So those things, how do you manage around that, and what is it that you bring to the workplace
Hmm.
in the form of your workshops? And I know you do a lot of work and training around the world, so just can
Yeah.
you just touch upon it and how we can benefit from someone like you?
Well, I think first of all, what I do is to challenge the stigma is mental health. The definition by the World Health Authority is a state of well-being. So mental health is a state of well-being.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the first thing I do, and everyone has that same reaction. Oh,
Okay.
okay. And yet we're all reluctant to talk about it. So that's really interesting. So first of all, I destigmatize by giving the right definition that it's a state of well-being. And then, but we often hear mental health challenges, mental health issues, mental health disorders, and even the word mental in England, it's got a lot of very negative associations. Growing up, it's used by children to hurt each other, your mental,
Your mental. Yeah.
this sort of thing. So it's kind of reclaiming the terminology to repackage it in a more productive, sort of positive focus. And also then it's looking at, you said I feel depressed, and this is one of the things I talk about. People say, oh, I'm feeling depressed, when actually they're feeling a bit low or they're feeling sad. And so the words we use aren't helping. Depression is a diagnosable mental health condition, but you need a GP to diagnose that. Otherwise, we're feeling sad, we're feeling low. But where it becomes overwhelming and constant, and where we really can't function properly anymore, that's when we can get the diagnosis of depression. And there's things like obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, which is quite a common mental health condition. And again, people will say, "Oh, I've got a bit of OCD." Do you
Yeah.
have that as well?
Yeah, yeah. They're
Yeah,
constantly, I'm so OCD, and it's almost like a badge. They think they're
yeah,
wearing a medal saying, I'm so OCD, or he's so OCD, she's so OCD.
yeah. And actually, if you have OCD, it's a really debilitating condition that really impacts your life. And so, really starting to challenge those ways that we're talking about mental health, so that again we can really start to reframe how we're looking at everything. So looking at some of those common mental health issues, and what are the signs and symptoms? How do we know within ourselves if we are struggling? Because often we're on a hamster wheel. Especially if we're really want to achieve, we're constantly pushing ourselves. If we are struggling, we think, just push on through, just keep pushing. We think at some point we're going to break through to a better place, but actually what we're going to do is have a breakdown if we don't start to notice what's happening and then start to rebalance. And I think we were going to show a slide around
Sure.
stress.
Yeah, I was just
If
going
we
to come
can
back
watch
to
that.
that.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to talk to you about peak performance, the pressure of peak
Mm-hmm.
performance,
Yeah.
of constantly performing, and the
Yeah.
pressure of the stress. Yeah, please.
Exactly. So the peak performance is, I'll talk about that after we've talked about the
Sure.
stress bucket. We'll come back to that one. So this stress bucket, I think it's a really good image for people. So we all have a stress bucket. And over time, we might have financial worries. We might have worries at work. We might have an issue with a colleague or our line manager. It might be we're just not enjoying our job. It could be money worries, or all sorts of things. And all of these things start to fill up our stress bucket. Over time, our stress bucket can start to get full. And if you can see at the bottom there, we've got these taps. And what they do is when you turn on the taps, it starts to relieve some of the stress. And so that would be things like we were saying, meditation, mindfulness, having some trusted friends that we can talk to, making sure that we're eating well and exercising. All of these things are taps that we can, dancing, listening to music, anything that you love to do, learning a new language, they start to de-stress us. If we don't have these taps, if we don't have these things to help to recharge, what happens is our bucket will overflow at some point, and that will lead to poor mental health, if not a mental health illness at some point. And so this image can really help people to think, so I'd really invite people to think, what taps have you got at the moment? Are they switched on? Or do you think, oh yeah, I go to the gym, but actually haven't been for the last 4 weeks? Well, I know we can't in England, but those kind of things, even just going out to exercise. Sometimes we can kid ourselves, oh yeah, I do that, but actually we haven't done it for months. So, be really honest with yourself and start to put in place those things. And they're not optional. We actually really need these things to be in place.
Sure. So you're saying that if someone feels stressed, because a lot of us are normally feel stress because life is not that easy, right? But
Yeah.
these days, and I'm bringing it back to the last 3-4 months of COVID-19 times, right? When there is so much of uncertainty, I'm certain the stress levels are higher. The stress levels for me are far, far higher than they've ever been. It's just the uncertainty. You don't know where your income is coming from. When you're going to get next step out. Are you going to get the COVID if you put yourself in compromising situations? All those questions unanswered. So we're saying then add to that the stress of work, right? People are working from home. That's what we're all doing. There are technology stresses, there are work stresses, there's productivity stresses, there is, will I keep my job, is my job safe stresses, that's happening. There is stress of the family, you have to cook, clean, manage the family as well. In some cases, there is, sorry, I'm going to say that aloud, domestic violence in the confinements of their home, you're not safe. So many stresses at one time. The buckets are overflowing, Liz.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
What can we do to provide conversations to companies who are watching this, saying, how can you help people, empty their buckets or have a bucket that's not leaking?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think it's so important. And when we're stressed, we can go into automatic negative thoughts, and they lead to other negative thoughts. So, I'm not sure about my job, and what about my money? And we can get caught in these loops, they're just, our minds are constantly racing. And I found that at the beginning of lockdown, I was triggered into fight, flight, or freeze. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's all response to threat. And I found COVID-19 was a threat, and I was almost freezing. And then I realized what was happening. And then I need to meditate more. I need to make sure I'm going outside for a walk. I need to listen to music. I need to watch TED Talks. I need to, even if my mind is telling me, I haven't got time for that, because there's all these things, I have to make time for that, because otherwise I know that I'm really going to keep struggling more and more and more. So it's about, on an individual level, really finding that balance for yourself. You'll know in yourself what those things are for you. Even if it's having a bath, we have, in England, having a bath is something that we have as some time for us just to be in the bath. If you've got kids, it might be the only time, but take it, listen to some music, listen to a meditation, and even if it's on going to the bathroom, if that's the only time you can get. But just make sure that you're putting in these things which are going to help you to balance and to recharge. And for organisations, I would say it's about educating yourself more about mental health. It's about training your managers to be able to spot signs and symptoms and to have these sorts of conversations. And a lot of people are afraid to. What if somebody opens up and I don't know what to say? Well, then, you need to educate yourself, because that's not a reason to not have that conversation. Because what if that person then goes and commits suicide, or, gets into real trouble? I think we all have a responsibility to support each other at the moment. And it's also, creating ways within your organisation for people to be able to talk to people. So you might have counselling that people could access, or employee assistance programs, which are worldwide, that you could set up, that your teams could access confidentially. There's all sorts of things. But I'd say educate yourself, find out, really how can you set up a culture which is supportive of mental health and well-being, so that your teams can thrive, so that everybody can feel that they can be themselves at work, that there's no shame going on, that people aren't at work and struggling and are afraid to say it. All of this is what's happened before. It doesn't have to be like that anymore.
Sure. No, fantastic insights. Liz, what about the pressure of expectations? One is the expectations from your own self, and I'll give you an example from India. I come from India, as you know, and in India, right from, because of the competitive nature of the world that we live in, the environment, what happens is that there's a lot of pressure put on us by the families that we have
Mhm.
to achieve a certain kind of, say, percentage in our school and colleges for us to get admission to better education. And it is exceptionally competitive. We take that into a work environment. Work environment becomes competitive. Our managers know that, they put a lot of pressure on us. There's pressure for the business to thrive because, again, it's a competitive environment. So we are constantly in an environment where the expectations are not average, is far, far beyond average. So
Yeah.
imagine the kind of pressure that must put on us. How do you manage those kind of pressures? How do you manage your own expectations of yourself? And how
Mhm.
do you manage the expectations of your employees?
Great questions. I think the first thing is to understand that in order to be at your peak performance, which is what we all are talking about, really, organizations want everyone to be at their peak performance. You have to have these other things in place. It's just not possible to keep overachieving and not have these things in place to balance and recharge. So it's really important that organizations start to understand that. And there was a big survey done recently for peak performers worldwide. And the one thing they all had in common was that they took rest every day.
Wow.
The one thing they all had in common. So it's understanding that, it's like when you go to the gym to build a muscle, you lift a weight and then you have to relax it. And then you lift a weight and then you have to relax it. And it's that image. We can't, otherwise, if we're constantly trying to hold the weight, we actually drop it. If we want to build that resilience and build the muscle, we have to hold it and then relax it. And it's the same we need to do within ourselves. If we're putting our mind under a lot of pressure and stress, we have to allow it to rest, whether that's meditation, mindfulness, having a sleep. People hear, oh God, having a sleep. But all these peak performers, the one thing they all did was have a rest in the day. That's telling you that really supports them. And you mentioned peak performance earlier, so I'll bring that in.
Sure.
It's a balancing act. Our peak performance is it's a peak. And heading up to that, we have kind of our optimum stress levels and our performance. And then there's a balancing peak. And then we go over into strain. If we're overachieving all the time, we go into strain. And if our systems are constantly in strain, it has a physical impact on us, a negative physical impact, a negative impact on our mental health. And if we're constantly pushing, then that's going to be a slippery slope down into crisis and eventually burnout, which is what organizations really don't want. So it's understanding all of this. If you really want your teams, and of course you do, to be peak performers, then you need to be able to balance that pressure with some of these things that recharge. You've got to have these other things in place, which a lot of organizations worldwide are now putting in place. They'll put more well-being things in place for their employees. They will have employee assistance programs, because the cost of mental health, the cost of people having time off, or the support that they need when they're in crisis, or the staff turnover is astronomical. These figures are huge. In England, it's 42 billion pounds.
Oh, wow.
That's in England. And so organizations are really sitting up and taking notice. 42 billion pounds. If you front end that and start to really support your teams, then you're going to thrive. They're going to thrive. You're going to have less staff turnover. And there's something called presenteeism. It's this new terminology, which they say is 10 times the cost of absenteeism. It's where you're at work, but your productivity is less because you're not 100% with your mental health. So you may need to read things a couple of times. Do you ever do that? I do that when I'm tired. Oh, gosh, I've read that, but nothing's gone in. I'm going to have to read it again. Or it could be that you need reassurance. It might be that you keep having to ask your manager, is this okay? Are you sure this is okay? Whereas before I would have been confident, but if I'm starting to get overtired, I might start to doubt myself, or I'll make mistakes. It'll be costly mistakes. So all of these things, presenteeism is a really big cost. So in that 42 billion in the UK, 27 billion pounds presenteeism cost.
Wow.
That's been
I
estimated.
think we've absolutely all been there. And
Yeah,
there are so many things we have to learn and unlearn, isn't it, Liz? And
yeah,
we need more people like you for sure who will, sadly you have had a really bad experience,
mm,
but whether from experience or not, someone who understands the space comes in and allows people to just be. Because I think that's
yes,
also what is difficult. I mean, we've run businesses and I've worked in very large companies myself. And like you said, we just put on a mask, go to work. There are some days you can manage, some days you cannot manage. I
yeah,
cannot even imagine. I worked like 29 years this year, and I'm thinking I cannot even imagine the number of years I was not really present and the kind of,
yeah,
salaries I have got, but I haven't like really earned my salary, you know
hmm,
and
yeah.
imagine that for the company. So I wish things change for all of us. I've got some more comments coming in. I just want to, Roshni, thank you, love you too. Ritu, thank you so much. I hope, Ritu, that we were able to respond to your question, and that's one thing that it just kind of kept playing in my mind. I feel so sorry that you've been through this, but yes, please seek support. Please seek even professional support or friends I'm sure you have around. It's a lot to keep inside yourself, and you don't want to sit back later and have any
Mhm.
regrets. We're all here for you. Feel free to reach out. Ravi Kamboj is here saying pretty engaging. Thank you, Ravi. Raj Singh Rawat says hi. Hi, Raj. And, I'm now going to bring you back to the Liz that, the personal Liz. And, we're talking about the Liz, the coach, and we're talking about Liz. So, look, tell me, after all these years, you've been through this huge journey. Have you made peace?
I was just giving myself an honest check-in. I thought, is there any part of me that's resisting this? And there really isn't. I really have made peace, which is a beautiful thing.
But there's no
Yeah.
magic pill, right? It didn't happen
There's
overnight.
no magic pill. No, it's been a process. And I think that's, it's one step at a time. Sometimes I felt like I was going around in circles. Sometimes I felt like I was going backwards, but I never stopped my commitment. That was the choice that I kept making. I kept trusting that a better day was possible. And now I know it is. And that's the thing. I can genuinely say there is light at the end of the tunnel. And, it might seem like a dark tunnel at the moment, but just remember, even if it's a pinprick of light, it's there and you can head towards it.
And do you have triggers now after all these years?
Yeah, I do. Like I say, at the beginning of lockdown, I had a trigger. Suddenly, I felt trapped, and it was really triggering. My income disappeared because I'm a speaker and a trainer, and suddenly, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to let everything go. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to come back to myself. I'm going to trust. I'm going to surrender and take inspired action, which is how I live my life. Trust, surrender, and take inspired action. And then I started speaking online and training online. My business now is better than ever, actually. And I think it's because I trusted, surrendered, and took inspired action.
So what about anxiety and nervousness? Do you feel anxious sometimes? Do you feel
Mm.
nervous even now? And how do you cope with those?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And, I'm human as well. And I think, these are natural emotions. We will all feel anxious sometimes. We'll all feel angry sometimes. We'll all feel sad sometimes. But what I do now is if I feel triggered, if I feel anxious, I will, if I need to, reach out for support. So I've got really good support. I'll get professional support if I need to, or I've got really good friends, trusted network. But I also have been able to turn towards myself with love and compassion. So it's like I give the anxiety a hug. I know it might sound a bit strange to people, but I've built this within myself, because usually the anxious place is a younger me. This is how it works. It's a younger part of us that couldn't process what happened when they were younger, and so I just keep sending those parts of me love and compassion, and they settle down, and then the adult Liz is able to take the inspired action.
So what happens when you have those dark moments and nothing can, shrug it away? What do you do?
I don't get those moments anymore. I think I have a connection now to my personal spiritual connection to something much greater than me. And so I never feel that anything is completely that dark anymore, because there's always light now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful to end this conversation on that note. All I can see is light, laughter, smiles, and I can see, no, seriously, and I can see a lot of learnings, Liz, from life
Yeah.
experiences that you have had. You haven't made them bring you down fully. Maybe at some point they did, but here you are sharing your lessons with us. Thank you for sharing your story. Audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We'll be here live for another minute or so. In the meantime, Liz, is there any advice, anything you want to say to the new generation, the millennials?
Wow, I just want to say how impressed I am by you all. I think, younger generation are incredible. And I think you're so much more aware and conscious than my generation has been. I would say apparently the younger generation are the least likely to talk about mental health at work, the most likely to talk to their friends about mental health. So I would just encourage you to find a way to speak up. You are the new generation. I've done my journey, but you guys can really take the mantle and lead with it. Don't settle for anything less than your worth and that you deserve.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kranti Salvi, saying thank you for sharing your experience and lessons. Thank you, Kranti, for joining us. And on that note, Liz, thank you very much for being so authentic, so vulnerable, so honest with us. And I really truly know for a fact that there are a lot of companies, I know individuals as well, but individuals through companies will be interested in your talks because you have brought in lessons for us, which I think can be implemented not just in India, but throughout the world. There is
Yeah.
a huge amount of stress on workplaces, on people who are expected to work longer hours, be more productive, they have huge targets to meet. And particularly now in the economic downturn that's happening, I think all of us will go back to workplaces with far more expected out of us. So,
Yes.
yeah, so we will learn from this. Please, people watching, do seek support, do seek professional help if you need them. Nobody is going to question. There's no stigma attached to this. We're all in the same place. And really, like someone said to me just yesterday, don't think that you're the only person who feels any mental health issues. Everybody feels the same. It's just
Yeah.
different degrees of it, right?
And you
And
are not alone.
and just for people watching, know that I spent 3 hours in bed today. I just couldn't get myself out. And I was in that dark place. And I came out because I was going to talk to Liz today. And I'm so glad I personally needed this today. And thank you very much. And thank you, Nicola Fenton, for behind the scenes and giving us this tech support. And Nicola curates a lot of this for us. And we will see you all, audience, on the 22nd of July. Again, 8:30 p.m. India time, 4 p.m. UK. And this time we're going to talk about yoga and the essence of yoga with Rupal Sitpura and Anurag Kashyap, the filmmaker. And see you soon. And you know where to reach me for feedback, questions. We will have Liz answer them, surely. And it's at Totally Out Now or at Speaking Minds Global. Liz, thank you so much. Lots and lots of love to you and all the best. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you. We'll see you in India soon.
Great.